Dave Aranda is back in the analogies game, and it is just like you remember it on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Gametime. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Dave Aranda made another pop culture reference. He used to be really into those, went away from it, went back to it this week, and now we know why he went away from it for a while. For being honest, we have our first of a recurring segment with Will Turboff for a little recruiting update on the Baylor football front of things. And we're looking at the offensive line just a little bit, because that seems to be everyone's number one concern about this team. And I'm right there with you. Let's just say that. In his weekly press conference, Dave Aranda dipped back into the well of Dave Aranda analogies. And I think someone got in his ear after 2022 and said, hey, or maybe even before 2022, let's tone this down a bit. It's really easy fodder for people when we're not playing very well, because still to this day, people will think of Dave Aranda as the Berenstain Bears guy. And it's like, yeah, but he hasn't talked about the Berenstain Bears in 3 years. And he only did it when Baylor was successful. And then when they're not successful, it's like, oh, this guy is the wuss, the Berenstain Bears guy. And we've gotten a lot more of the, Dave Aranda trying to stretch something more so than the analogies. In fact, the analogies make more sense a lot of the time than what Dave Aranda was saying a lot of last year in terms of, we got guys here and we need them to be here and we got to meet them here. And there's a little bit too much of this and not enough of that. And like, what are you talking about? Right? So at least a lot of the analogies made sense. I can't say the same about the most recent one he put out there. I love a good analogy. I am the king of forcing analogies, and I always try to make sure they make sense. I don't say analogies just for the sake of saying analogies. So I'm never going to get on Dave Aranda's case just for making an analogy. In fact, I really understood the Berenstain Bears ones. It made a ton of sense. Not just because they were winning, but yeah, it did help that they were winning, that we were more open to it, but those made sense. The one he made in his weekly press conference this week, I don't think is all the way there. Here's what he had to say about his football team.
We've shown a movie clip from the Three Amigos. There's a scene in there where Steve Martin's character gets shot, and they're actors, and they're thinking it's an act, and they're thinking that this village has hired them to act, and the villagers are trying to get back their village. They hired them for real, and it's a real fight and all this. And the village, there's, I think it's El Guapo is the bandito, And so Steve Martin's character gets shot and is upset about it, and says, "I'm bleeding and everything." And he goes to the bad guys and he goes, "You better watch it, mister," and this whole thing. And then he finds out that it's real bullets, and he goes back to the other two amigos and he goes, "It's real. This is real. They're trying to kill us." And so I think that was early in fall camp, that every day's got to be intentional, got to be purposeful. This is real, And so I mentioned that a couple times this morning to guys, and I think everyone gets it.
First off, just impeccable delivery of this. You would never know it was from a comedy film or a comedic scene, because he doesn't even crack a smile. In fact, people are laughing in the press conference who have seen the movie probably, and Dave just does not. He's like, "Yep, it's real. They're really shooting at us." And so points to Dave for going out there, delivering it in such a serious tone that we think it's like the real thing. But what I hope that Dave did not show his players the rest of that clip, which it sounds like he did because he's describing some of it in the scene. I don't know if he remembers what happens like directly after that in the movie, but basically Steve Martin tells Martin Short and Chevy Chase that it's real, and they all start sobbing. They all start crying. And Steve Martin goes and talks to El Guapo and says, "Hey man, we're not actually bandits, man. We're just actors. We do show tunes. Here's one of them." And they're like literally crying in front of this guy to the point where El Guapo says, "I only shoot men. I do not shoot sobbing women." Is that what this is supposed to be? Because that would make sense from last year's 3-9 record. I get the message he's trying to send is that, hey, no one's pretending. It's live bullets out here. But the exact scene that he's talking about, they're also saying, "Oh, please don't shoot. We'll get out of here. Please let us get out of here." Is that the mentality you want for a football game? I don't think so, right? So I don't want to be that guy that just, has to turn down every Dave Aranda analogy that's out there. But this, I don't think is it. I don't think this is the one that you think it is. I don't think it's the one we should be going for here. I think there's another analogy to be used. To keep watching some films, I think there's another one that could pop up in there rather than, yeah, the bullets are live now and I'm going to cry my way out of the situation. I hope that is not the tactic that Baylor football is going after this year. I couldn't believe it because I had to go back. I hadn't seen the Three Amigos in years. And I had to go back and see the scene because I was like, I think this ends the way I remember it ending. It's not, they don't just say, "This is real. Let's fight back and take out the banditos." They don't do that. They literally cry their way out of it. In fact, they say, "We'd like to go home now." Please, please don't let that be the mentality. So pull a certain lesson from this, just not the whole scene. I respect that Dave Aranda is going back to the analogies, though. As the king of forced analogies, I like that he's back with that, but this was not it. This was not the analogy you thought it was for a football team ready to bounce back with a chip on their shoulder. That's not it, coach. I respect the going for it, but this is one that will be played back big time if it's not a successful season for Baylor football. And even if it's not a successful season for Baylor football, there are bright days ahead. Trust me, we've covered it all summer on the recruiting trail. And so Will Turboff of 247 Sports Bears Illustrated is going to join us for a little bit of a, update on how that's going for Baylor. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Now, look, some of you are into doing the hassle when it comes to buying tickets for your favorite events, whether it be, Baylor football games or the Oasis reunion tour. You might like the hassle. I don't. So I go to Gametime, all right? I go in there. I see the all-in pricing right away. I see the view from my seats right away. And there's also zone deals and flash deals going on throughout the week. And plus, they have the lowest price guarantee. Your Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, COLLEGE at the end for $20 off. Download Gametime today because what time is it? Gametime. Whoo! Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You guys have heard me talk about FanDuel so much. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Why wouldn't I talk about it? Well, we have something a little different for you now. Because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and then you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Will Turboff of Bears Illustrated 247 joining for what is, I guess we can go out there and say it, what is going to be a weekly segment. Now, Will, I have not thought of a name for it yet. You've got some good creative juices. You're young. I would like you to think of something that we could do for this. But it is going to be our weekly check-in with Will Turboff and how things are going in the Baylor Bears recruiting cycle. We're kind of through with 2025. Am I right about that, Will? Or are there people we should be looking out for during this high school football season who have not made that commitment yet?
Yeah, we're getting close to being done with 2025, and I think looking back a couple months ago, a lot further, and closer to being done than I would have expected. But with that huge July, picking up over a dozen commitments, and laying the groundwork for your 2026 class, they have had the opportunity to kind of slow down, and that's why over the last few weeks you haven't seen that much buzz around Baylor, and that's generally across the country. You don't see that much in August.
Right.
It's a very quiet, dead period. But Baylor still has, a few players they're looking at. They're going to be, on flip watch for a lot of these guys. There's a few for sure. And I think we can give out a few names. Zay Gentry out of Anna, used to play at McKinney. He's, been to Baylor several times. Of course, he's all wrapped up in that DFW Metroplex pipeline that they've got going on right now. And he's committed to SMU right now. But as we've seen, the SMU and Baylor recruiting rivalry has heated up in the last couple of weeks or months. And, they'll have a good shot with him. We'll see if they can get him on campus. I know that was something, they were looking forward to do early in the season. But this is, as said on the Bears Illustrated board a few days ago, there's a legitimate shot that Baylor is able to flip this one. They would like to add another quarterback to this class. Wisconsin would also like to do that. So being in a battle, a little ACC, Big 10, Big 12 battle. Yeah. Maybe we'll see an SEC team get in here. Texas was involved at one point. He's a great player. He is transferring to Anna, which is, obviously doesn't have the star power. For those of you who pay attention to Texas high school football, as McKinney does, and he's not going to have the platform that he did there. But based on, what we saw in College Station a few months ago at the state 7-on-7 tournament, he's really stepped up his game physically, just the footwork and everything and coverage. And those games, you can't always tell. The guys have made improvements. But Zay Gentry would be a steal for Baylor. Rated as a high 3-star by us. And he's not the only one they're looking after.
Yeah. By the way, not a great historical power, but they are the defending state champs, those Anna Coyotes. And I mentioned that because friend of the show, Seth Parr, Sawyer Robertson's high school coach, now the head coach for the Anna Coyotes that won 4A Division I last year. Will, let's stick with quarterback. Let's go with a guy who is already committed to Baylor, and I've called him Jason Witten's quarterback. Quinn Murphy will actually play for Jason Witten for the first time this weekend. He is in that 2026 class, so a little bit further off, but I see this kid as someone who has rose up the rankings even in the last year. Of course, as a sophomore, that's kind of what happens, but correct me if I'm wrong, Will. This screams like a kid who is pretty highly rated now, but is still developing into the quarterback that will be even more highly touted, I think, by the end of his high school career.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Murphy committed to Baylor in the first or second week of August, myself and a lot of other people at 24/7 Sports caught a lot of flack for our rating of him, which is currently a little bit lower, a good amount lower than what some other sites have on him. But that's not to say that our scouting team, myself, a lot of other people in our network don't believe that Quinn Murphy, has the opportunity to rise into, legitimate 4-star possibility and, further up from there. He was at Regents here in Austin, where I am, the last 2 years, lit it up there both years. And I think seeing him on this Liberty Christian team over in Argyle, it's going to be a lot of fun. They've got some good competition. They play Texas High midway through the season. And that's one of those games where, you play in these private school leagues and you get to see the talent. You get to see what you would see on highlight tapes a lot. And that's, not a bad thing at all. And no disrespect to any kid who does that, because sometimes we see these private school kids turn out into great collegiate and great NFL players.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to see more from a scouting perspective. And Baylor has seen all they needed to see. They believe that he's going to be, going to finish as one of the top quarterbacks in that class. I feel the same way. And then getting to see him this year kind of progress, that junior season for quarterbacks is the biggest one. You'll note our ratings for quarterbacks over the last few months have changed drastically. I mean, look at a guy, Bryce Underwood was, consensus number one for 2 years. And since then, a lot of other guys, Keelan Russell's been thrown out for number one. Houston Longstreet, who's committed to A&M. So fret not that Quinn Murphy is a 3-star quarterback right now, because he's incredible talent. And I do believe that what we'll see this year at Liberty Christian will improve it a lot. And more than anything else, he will be a flag carrier for this class. I mean, no doubt.
Yeah.
Adding a quarterback this early is something that Baylor has had a hard time with over the last few years. They have been able to do it in some cases. The hard part is holding on to him.
Yeah.
This is around the time of that cycle when you get your guy. Schobel was a little bit earlier, and obviously they had to pivot from there. But Quinn Murphy bought in, and when I spoke to him, 2 or 3 months ago, he was saying everything was really open. And once Baylor started to get that momentum in recruiting, he really never turned around. He wanted to see that energy from Baylor. They had him up there on the last weekend in July for the Junior Day event. And I think we're seeing a lot of the same responses when it comes to why guys pick Baylor. And it's that energy. The energy was not there. Based on what we've heard from guys in the past, and the change is there, and the staff is preaching that we need guys that can push this narrative. It's not just the we pay players; it's the we're with the times, and those two things aren't exactly the same. It shows that Baylor is going to be able to adapt to all these changes, to conference realignment, to revenue sharing. Yes, the financial aspect is a large part of it, but it's the mindset shift and explaining how certain things are going to work when they haven't worked before. And Quinn Murphy, Davis Penn, Rylan Morris, those are 3 guys you already have in the 2026 class who are doing a great job of that.
And that's certainly the foundation of that 2026 class so far. And Keenan Hall's still cooking. But I want to follow up on that. So you mentioned, and it is a little bit lower in 247 versus some of the other sites. So what was kind of the reasoning behind that? You mentioned that you expect him to develop into that 4-star and that elite guy. So what is the story behind ranking him a little bit lower than some of the outlets right now?
I'm not actually part of our scouting team. I have a little bit of a say on how some of these ratings are affected based on guys that I see throughout the year. And I haven't, apart from film, I've never seen Quinn Murphy in person, which is something I'll be doing this year. So I can't give you the specifics on what went into that rating, but I can tell you that we are in August of his junior year, and those ratings are not final until the spring, after these guys are enrolled. So there will, like I said, I expect there to be a lot of movement.
Sure. And I know one you're watching is Kamora Morgan, 4-star defensive end. Now at South Oak Cliff, they got a big game this weekend. And it all starts this week, Will. So I know you're going to be all over this. You're going to be like Schefter. You're going to have both phones out. You'll be following every high school football game. So we do look forward to checking in with you now every week. Will Turboff, 247 Sports, Bears Illustrated. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this every week. I don't know about a name yet, so we might have to talk about that.
We are workshopping it. We will get there. I can feel it. I know we got a lot going on, all of us. There's so much chaos when it comes to football season and the kids are back in school. Well, 5-Hour Energy fixes tired, and it fixes it fast. Whether you have a long to-do list for work or a list of DIY projects, tackle at home before the football game, take a 5-Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects, okay, whether at work or for the home or for anything else. When you get supplies for the project, do not forget the most essential one, which is a 5-hour energy shot. And with zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. So try the 5-hour energy website because they got flavors galore. Watermelon, tropical burst, grape berries, so much more. Try them all. Why not? On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. So go to 5hourenergy.com. That is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-hour energy product today. You can use my promo code, which is LockedOnCFB, to receive 20% off your order. Now, this offer is only valid till September 30th on one order, and it can't be used with other promotions. The code is not good for subscription orders. But once again, that is 5hourenergy.com with the promo code LockedOnCFB to receive 20% off that order. Go there today. All right, so I posed the question out there on Twitter, X, of what is your biggest question going into week 1 of the Baylor season? And I don't know if you guys know this algorithm stuff, Twitter, Facebook. If you put in a picture, people are more likely to see and engage with your post. So I looked up some funny Baylor picture, and it's that one that's, the guy holding up the sign that's like A&M keeping ugly girls out of Waco since 1876. Funny. And so I'm like, that'll capture people's attention. And it did. I got some great response to it, but mainly through the retweets and likes. I was actually asking a question for you guys and didn't get a ton of responses in there. Got a couple, and I've gotten the same responses in the comment section of what is your number one concern heading into week 1. Pretty across the board, it is the offensive line. I get it. It's my biggest concern too. In fact, I can look at either line and say, I don't know that these have gotten better. There's nothing that has showed me that it has gotten better. In fact, we're supposed to have a guest on tomorrow that I think will have a better answer than I do. But you look at the depth chart, and of course that name "or" popped up everywhere, and it popped up in both guard positions for Baylor. One of the guys I thought was coming in to play tackle, a couple of guys who are in this mix, in this rotation, who didn't come until after spring practice, which I don't love that, because I think offensive line is the one unit that you really need a ton of chemistry and guys playing together. But then again, they needed to bolster that offensive line. So I can't really criticize them for bolstering the offensive line at the time that they had to. But I do have that concern going in to week 1 of the season. So those things come up. I also heard in that Ricky Thompson interview with Sikkim that we played a bit of, or reacted to a bit of a few weeks ago. He was talking about the first scrimmage that they had in fall camp, and he was saying, man, this Baylor defensive line, it looks way better than it did last year. And I think Ricky's a pretty good analyst, so I'm trusting him on that. But there is part of me, the skeptic in me, which is actually more than it was the majority of me, was thinking, so the defensive line looked good when it was going against Baylor's offensive line. Like, let's not forget that here, which of course leads me to believe, or leads me to ask, is the defensive line actually better? Or does it look pretty damn good going against this Baylor offensive line? I think that's a question worth asking. I think they made some good moves in the portal for the future, but yeah, that is a major, major, major concern for me for this season and for week 1 especially. And you probably won't learn a ton about this offensive line in week 1. And I always say about these buy-in games that you're not going to learn anything positive about this unit in week 1. If they play well and keeps Daquan Finn off his butt in the backfield, then we will rightly say, well, they were playing an FCS team, playing a team that's not on the level of Baylor, although a pretty good FCS team, right? So that's what we'll say. But if there is something that we're taking away from the game against an FCS opponent, it's usually that they were bad. It's usually that they gave up 6 sacks against Tarleton State. So probably no news is somewhat good news when it comes to this week. Now, the week after against Utah, I think JT Wistersill said that was something that they need to get better at for the Utes, is that pass rush. So maybe we'll learn a little bit more, maybe not. So good and bad there is that we might not learn a lot about this Baylor offensive line for a couple of weeks, but the good side of that, if you're looking for the positive side, is that they can play together for a couple of weeks and get more familiar with each other and get that chemistry that this unit needs before hitting the big time opponents. And I mean, really, when you're talking about big pass rushes, you're probably not seeing that until Iowa State in this third week of conference, which is the first weekend in October. And even then, that is something they are just positive about this year, but was not a strength for them at all last year. In fact, they had one of the worst pass rushes in the nation last year. But we had Bill Seals on, and Matt Campbell was talking about this too. They believe that's actually going to be a strength for them this year. So you could be getting into halfway through the season before you're facing a real, true elite Big 12 pass rush. And so that might be the saving grace here. It's something I came across last night that I was like, wow, that could be a real help to this Baylor team. And maybe Utah has a really good pass rush. And to be honest, I don't think a lot of us are under the illusion they're going to win that game anyway. So you figure out some things, you get battle tested early, you find out that the banditos shooting at you, aka the pass rush, is coming with real bullets, aka a real pass rush. And you Three Amigos it, you do your song and dance, you go home, you regroup, and you find that you are battle tested for those next banditos. I really tried there, Dave. I really tried with the analogy there. Anyway, let me know what you think about Dave Aranda's analogies, what you think about this offensive line. Drop that down in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell on YouTube to find whenever we are dropping our podcast, which is every day. And in football season, it's going to be like 6 days a week. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts for free. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We will see you tomorrow as we continue to preview week 1 of the college football season. Man, it still feels good to say on your favorite show, which is, of course, Locked On Baylor.